So we'll be reviewing the processes of project management by process group. We'll be going all the way down initiating and then planning, followed by executing, monitoring and controlling, and finally closing processes. So let's get started with the initiating process group and the develop project charter process.
Our first process is develop project charter. What is the end goal of developing a project charter? To come out with a project charter, of course, right? I mean, the name kind of gives it away, doesn't it? It's about developing a project charter. So the project charter is developed with a number of inputs, a number of tools and techniques, a number of outputs. But let's talk about the first input to developing the project charter. The first input is the project statement of work. Now, the project statement of work is a narrative description of what needs to be done. Internal projects typically have a project statement of work worked on by someone internal to the company, could be the sponsor or initiator. But talking about external projects, it's coming from the customer. Our next input is the business case. The business case makes a case for the project. And that's why it's called a business case. The business case contains a cost-benefit analysis, different reasons as to why the project should be authorized. The next input is agreements. Now, this is a relatively new term as far as ITTOs go. It was not in the 4th edition. An agreement is simply an agreement between you and some other person. Could be an internal person, internal stakeholder, or external stakeholder. When we talk about agreements, agreements are used to define the initial intent or intentions of a project. It's really used to put people on the same page, and this could be letters of agreement, a memorandum of understanding, even plain old emails. These are examples of agreements, and these agreements help us develop the project charter. They further clarify what is in the project and what is not. Remember that old email you got from the customer right at the beginning, even before a charter was issued? Well, that could become an input to actually developing the charter. The next input is our favorite from the 4th edition, Enterprise Environmental Factors. Now, why do I call it our favorite? If you had read the 4th edition, you will remember Enterprise Environmental Factors were a recurring theme all throughout planning and other processes. So now it's kind of repeated. We have Enterprise Environmental Factors, and the final input is organizational process assets. So those are your inputs to develop project charter. What tools and techniques do we have? The tools and techniques, one of them is pretty much the same, expert judgment. What is expert judgment? Now think about it. You're working on a project. You want to develop a project charter. A particular area of the charter might be giving you challenges. What do? Try to do it all alone? No. You look for people that can help you out. You look for people who can take you from being clueless to being clued in. And I call that expert judgment. So expert judgment could come from a variety of sources. You get that expert judgment, and what do? You apply it. You use it. You get people who can help you apply expert judgment to developing a project charter. Now, internal projects, we may not have a rigorous project charter development process, but in other companies and even government projects, the project charter could be a big deal. And that's why you need expert judgment. Our next tool and technique is a new one. It's called Facilitation Techniques. Facilitation Techniques. Well, as the name facilitation implies, facilitation techniques are used to facilitate the development of the project charter. And these cut across project management, things like brainstorming, conflict resolution techniques, and so on. And what is our output from this whole thing? The project charter. The project charter authorizes the project manager to apply resources to projects. What else does the project charter do, apart from identifying the project manager? It also identifies the project sponsor or initiator, typically signed by a manager external to the project and at a level that is on par with the project. So you want someone who knows about the project, who is in management, and someone whose signature on that project charter actually means a lot to the people reading it. So your project charter authorizes the project, authorizes the project manager, identifies the high-level risks, the high-level assumptions, high-level constraints, all of that high-level information needed to kick off the project. That's what your project charter is all about. And that concludes our first process, develop project charter.
So let's go over a few key things to note for the exam. When you study the Develop Project Charter process, observe the unique inputs. In the PMBOK guide, there are several recurring themes across the processes, across the knowledge areas and process groups. But when you are studying on the final lab, it is very important that you zero in on those unique inputs in every process. In the Develop Project Charter process, the unique inputs which do not appear in any other process are the project statement of work. You must understand that the project statement of work comes from the customer or on internal projects from the sponsor. You must also understand the next input, the business case, and what it does. What is the value of having a business case? It identifies why the project should be in existence. It makes a case for the project. It's a unique input here. Agreements is not a unique input in that you might find agreement in other places in the PMBOK, but it is the first place that it appears in the PMBOK. So when you think about agreements, understand that you might find it in the determine budget process, for example. You might find it in a few other places. But the key thing here is it is the first time it appears in the PMBOK. So understand that it's not just talking about contracts, but also any other type of agreement. Taking a look at the tools and techniques, expert judgment is a recurring one. Facilitation techniques is also a recurring one. But try to understand what these facilitation techniques are at a high level so that when you see them again and again, you'll get the understanding of the broad context of these facilitation techniques, and you'll be able to relate that to the process at hand. Finally, the unique and only output of the Develop Project Charter process is the Project Charter. You must understand what the Project Charter is in great detail. Authorizes the project, authorizes the project manager to apply resources, contains high-level information about almost everything you can imagine, risks, scope, milestones, and so on. Now, a few questions for you before we round up. What is the difference between the project statement of work and a project scope statement? 2. In what ways is the project charter relevant to other processes that occur after it? In other words, ask yourself, which processes is the project charter used as an input? To answer this question properly, you need to think about the planning process group in particular, and you need to think about the triple constraint of time, cost, and scope, and the first process in those areas, plan schedule management, plan scope management, and plan cost management. You also need to think about risk management, the plan risk management process. There are other processes where the project charter is used, such as in identify stakeholders. So go through the relevant data flow diagrams and observe where the project charter is used as an input. And that concludes our review of what to expect on the exam within the Develop project charter process.